Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Toe to Toe with the CXO, Improving Your Executive Selling Conversations. My name is Marissa Mueller. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at Corporate Visions, and I'll be moderating today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to first go over a few housekeeping items just to make today's event as interactive as we possibly can for everybody. You've joined the presentation using your computer speakers by default. If you prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You also have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane on the control panel on the right. Feel free to send in your questions at any time during today's event. We will collect these and answer as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Also, as a reminder, following the event, we will be sending all attendees a recording of today's webinar along with the actual slides within the next 24 hours. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Here to kick off the content and introduce our special C-level guest is Tim Reister, Chief Strategy Officer for Corporate Visions and author of the just released book, The Expansion Sale. Take it away, Tim.
Thanks, Marissa. Appreciate it. I want to take just the first 3 minutes to establish why I think all of you are here today. Then I'll introduce our C-level experts to address what I think are your primary questions, interests, and concerns today. But the reason I think we're all here today is the recognition that 80% of B2B purchase decisions now require a VP or higher level sign-off. And the challenge, though, is that when we've looked at or engaged with decision makers or companies that are trying to reach the B2B audience, is that only 10% of opportunities in your CRM system will have a VP or higher level title associated with it. So here's what I want you to think about. If 80% of decisions in B2B buying requires a VP or higher level signature, how many opportunities, live opportunities in your CRM today have a VP or higher level title associated with it? And what we're seeing is on average, sometimes as low as 10%. So we call this sort of the fear of heights. And the challenge with the fear of heights is that if for a sales rep to get to the executive level and have a conversation with a C-level buyer, the coaches in your corner aren't necessarily experienced enough at that level to help you. So for example, if you have someone in the organization you're selling to a couple levels down, they haven't been an executive and maybe their coaching isn't necessarily as accurate as it needs to be in terms of what the executive's thinking about and how they make decisions. Or your manager, your own sales manager, isn't necessarily a VP or higher level executive that makes these kinds of capital or large purchase decisions. Or maybe even your trainer who's trying to teach you how to have executive conversations. They themselves have never actually been an executive. So the question really becomes, how can you achieve the necessary executive altitude so that you can close more purchase decisions that require executive sign-off? So let's take a look at what it takes to actually achieve executive altitude, and then I'm going to bring in our executives. So Forrester Research, most of you are familiar with Forrester, that does a lot of research in various industries, identified that executive buyers say they would value from a salesperson business value and insight 4 times more than product expertise. The only problem is that these executives believe that the sales reps that they see are primarily proficient on their products and not on the business value. In fact, they identify that they are 4 times less likely to get the thing they value 4 times more. So we call this the business value gap. Sellers today at enterprise organizations in B2B need to overcome the business value gap in order to communicate effectively with executives. What we've been able to identify over time is that there are 3 areas that sales reps need to become proficient on. Number 1, 2, and 3, competence, confidence, and compelling. The idea with competence is you don't want to get delegated to someone you sound like. You want to be able to stay toe-to-toe with the CXO and have the competence to speak their language. 2, the confidence. You don't get as many of these experiences, so how do you gain confidence that you're going to be saying and delivering something of value? And 3, compelling. You want a decision, not a deferral. So the question really becomes, how do you build a business case that passes muster with the executive buyer? So with these 3 C's, we're going to make these our agenda today. We're going to walk through each of the 3 C's and give you some insights on how you can make this a part of your enterprise selling repertoire. So I'm going to introduce my speakers for today. We've got 2 Jims, and because 2 Jims are always better than 1 Jim. These guys are former C-level executives who have made millions of dollars of purchase decisions on the other side of the desk. And now they've come to the side where they coach and train and teach enterprise sellers how to engage C-level executives. So on the left is Jim Druckrey. He runs the C-level practice at Corporate Visions. And he helps train sellers on repeatable frameworks for how you build business impact stories and engage and communicate with executives in your business-to-business presentations and conversations. On the other side is Jim Fortner. He's an executive coach with a company called Emissary. Emissary is a really unique organization. They maintain a pool of executive decision makers. And when you want not just frameworks, but you want account-specific executive interaction, you need to speak to someone who's been at that account. Emissary actually has access to former executives at Fortune 1000 companies who've been at those accounts you're targeting. So imagine getting insights about an account you're targeting from somebody who's just been at that account. So interesting things for you to find out today, and we're going to work with each of them. So Jim Druckrey and Jim Fortner, I can tell your mics are on because I'm hearing noise from one or the other of you. So I want to ask you a question to get started. Jim Druckrey, when you've been on the other side of the desk, when you were a C-level executive making decisions, what's sort of the typical area that you see sellers, enterprise B2B sellers struggle with or stumble on the most?
Hey, Tim. You know, I can think of an example where an enterprise seller arranged a meeting with our C-suite in which he or she committed to providing insight about our business. The person came in and actually wound up talking about their products and services, not about our business, and was unaware we had just made a large acquisition, which they could help integrate. So most importantly, the salesperson didn't tell me something I didn't already know about an opportunity, problem, or risk I didn't know I had. And I think that gets to the objective of today's webinar of, you know, how do we elevate the conversation to the executive level?
Appreciate that, Jim, and we're going to hear a lot from you on this. Jim Fortner, what about you when you've seen reps struggle in your presence? Was it the size of the throne you sat on, or what was what made them struggle or submit?
Well, there is some of that. Being a part of one of the largest CPG firms in the world, there's a little bit of immaturity. You know, they come in and they would try to sell you something, and they had no idea how to really make it work. So they lacked depth and mastery. As soon as I started asking questions, it was apparent that they've really not tackled a real-time operation of over, you know, $60 billion. I think the other thing, just more broadly for me, what I look for in these sales reps, I want them to surprise me. I want them to come in and tell me more about my business than I know. I want them to teach me. And too often, they may not have done their homework. They didn't have time to do their homework. And they're only going to have one shot with me. And it's going to last a few minutes. It could be a successful conversation that goes 30 minutes to an hour. But if I can tell pretty quickly, if they don't have any good, surprising information to build my business, I'll shut that conversation down within 5 minutes, and they won't probably have another opportunity. That's just kind of the way it works.
It is the harsh reality, and I appreciate you guys sharing that. Let's get into our agenda, and we're going to kind of give each of you an opportunity to speak to each of the 3 C's: competence, confidence, and compelling. And again, for the audience sake, Jim Druckrey will be speaking about frameworks, preparation, the way you can think about structuring your conversation. Jim Fortner has experience and insight into how you get account-specific information and insights, and you can leverage that. So each one brings their expertise, to these issues, and I think you'll find that there's something to learn from each of these 3 C's. So Jim Druckrey, let's talk about competence. When you define competence, you talk about something called assuming the buyer's perspective. Maybe share with our audience what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure. So it's the first challenge. Competence is not competence in your own business. It's being perceived as competent in your customer's business. Because the fact is, enterprise sellers get delegated to who they sound like. So you get delegated to who you sound like. So you want to share competence in your customer's business to achieve what I like to call kind of, I know that you know that I know. So there's kind of 4 elements to this buyer's perspective or the executive perspective. And it all starts with external factors. So think of external factors out of the control of your C-level decision maker. So that can be everything from regulatory changes, interest rates, geopolitics, oil prices, technology changes. It's literally what keeps executives awake at night. But please don't ever ask an executive that question. The Harvard Business School did this kind of interesting study where they asked executive, what's the single most annoying question you get asked by enterprise salespeople? It's, well, what keeps you awake at night? I've been asked that question countless times. And the fact is, we're always talking about what keeps us awake at night. You can find it in our shareholders letter, in annual report, in an earnings call transcript, in our investor presentations. But the external factors are critical because it's where you can create the most value, as this is where both the problem and the solution are unknown. So you want to start each of your executive conversations with just a few external factors out of their control to establish your credibility in the first couple minutes of an executive conversation and achieve that I know that you know that I know. Secondly, the external factors are also critical because they shape and create your customers' business initiatives. So some companies call them business initiatives, some call them strategies, but it's the major drivers of the company. Are they trying to increase share, grow revenue, expand into new markets, grow through mergers and acquisitions? So what might their major initiatives be? And I'll actually give a quick example using SpaceX, because we all love SpaceX. And I'll do that to contrast the difference between a business initiative and then the next step of the framework. So the business initiative for SpaceX is to shoot commercial satellites into space cost effectively in a way that NASA was not able to, and to make this, an effective commercial business. That's the business initiative. But they're looking for broader business change. Your customers are looking for broader business change, where they're thinking about what's their current state and what's their longer term future state. So to use that example of SpaceX again, their business initiative is to launch and recycle commercial satellites and rockets, but their future state and the reason the company was created was to promulgate interplanetary habitation. So the reason SpaceX was created in their future state is how might we colonize Mars or the moon. Another example of a future state, and it shows how important it is to get your head inside your customer's business. John Hancock, as you all know, is one of the largest and oldest insurance companies in the U.S., made a stunning announcement in that they're going to stop selling traditional life insurance policies. They're only going to sell interactive insurance policies that track fitness and health. So you need to wear an Apple Watch or a Fitbit so they can track health metrics. So another way of saying it is in the future state for John Hancock is to really kind of get out of the insurance business and get into the biometric data collection business. So the point is, you want to understand the external factors that shape and create your customers' business initiatives, but what is that future state? How can you help them get to that future state? Because they can either figure this out on their own, your competitor can embed and help co-create that future state, or you as an enterprise seller can embed with your customer and imagineer what that future state is. And that's what creates this buying vision, the buying vision of where you want to lead your customer. And then importantly, we need to use financial metrics, because if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. Executives need to have an aggressive relationship with numbers, and they need that proof to underpin the buying vision. Now, maybe Jim Fortner to comment on this executive perspective and the importance of it. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think the framework here is a very good one. One thing I would do, because you're going to be on limited time with the executive, so to go through a process like this could take hours. I would get, and I don't mean to do an advertisement here, but a company like Emissary can hook you up with very specific knowledge experts. So if I'm calling on the retail industry with a very specific customer in the industry, I'd want to know more about them offline. I don't want to chew up my cycles with the business unit CXO to talk higher level stuff unless I have done thorough research myself. So I would get that in advance. And I'm amazed at how much information that you can get. So all that research up front is invaluable. The second is I find meetings that are specific really helpful. So I don't mind educating a little bit someone coming in, like a salesperson coming in, but honestly, I'm not there to educate them. They're there to educate me and come up with a value proposition. Now, what I'm looking for, and I'm going to piggyback on Jim, what you were talking about, is I'm looking for disruptors. Like, how is my business going to get disrupted? CXOs right now, they know with the digital age, disruption's coming everywhere, and from really on surprising resources, surprising capabilities are coming in sideways, and they're blindsiding them. There is no way a CXO can stay on top of everything anymore. And the speed at which you can be disrupted is really fast. So I think it's incredibly important to be strategic in your time. The CXOs have to be very strategic. They have to have good research out there. They have to have people coming in telling them how that industry is going to get disrupted, much like the example, Jim, you provided with the insurance company. That's a whole different focus of that company, and probably others will follow suit. So come in with specifics, come in with how you can disrupt and how you see disrupting occurring in the industry. Now, then say, here's how I can help you. And by the way, we've done it 5 times at these other companies, so I have a lot of competency in this particular field. You got as much time on my calendar now as it takes, because you got my attention. I feel threatened that we could get disrupted. You have some very good countermeasures, so we can respond to that. That's going to create some significant value.
Yeah, both Jim and Jim, it feels like this moment right here, this business change moment, like external factors, they're already talking about them. They just want to know, what they're concerned about. Business initiatives, they kind of know what theirs are. Again, they want to know that you can connect to something meaningful, but where you can, as you said, Jim Fortner, educate me and keep me alert to the disruptions. In fact, make sure I might know the thing I didn't know, happens right here. So it seems like you being able to, as a seller, come in and identify the current state, future state, and dialogue about what happens in between there and how that's coming to be and what's around the corner. That's the key moment of truth to be impactful and relevant. And because I think we all assume, yeah, you're going to need some ROI, but this, I think, is the news that you guys shared with me today. Any comments on that from either of you?
Yes, I agree with you. And I just think there's so much happening, especially again digitally, especially sensors are becoming available. Companies are connecting with other companies through blockchain. So innovation's occurring so much faster, and it requires a whole different skill set within companies. Companies are having a hard time, Tim, changing out their workforce. So you can't just upgrade your entire workforce overnight. So you have this constant transition occurring with people that are really good at reading externally and reacting to it. And then you have your, call it the legacy staff, that are too busy operating, and their heads are down so low, which I understand and I value that work, but their heads are down so low, they're missing the big picture.
Yeah.
And this is where I love when sales execs come in and talk to me about what's really happening in the industry and how they can change the game and help us. And that's so when you're teaching and you're sharing some things in a real proactive capacity, that you're going to get the time. And typically when I'm talking to the sales, like software sales or system integrators, they lack access to the C-suite. And it's because they can't have a relevant conversation like this.
Excellent. Jim Druckrey, any last thoughts on this before we go to the next one?
Yeah, I just had, to Jim's point about feeling threatened. So sometimes you can't challenge their strategy, but what you can do is challenge their certainty. And we'll talk a little bit about risk, but risk is one of the few subjects that doesn't get delegated down. It's being delegated up to the board level. So when you bring in a risk, you light up my brain to think more carefully about what I don't know.
Excellent. I think that's a great segue to the next one here. It's almost like we practiced it, guys. So let's talk about confidence. So competence is like have the right perspective, the C-suite perspective, and bring something that educates, teaches, and even give somebody a peek at something they didn't know, which I think then leads to confidence. If you have something like that to say, you can be confident, Jim Druckrey, that you're going to get some interest. So let's talk about what you call unconsidered needs and how they improve the confidence of the seller in knowing they're bringing something of business value to the C-suite.
Yeah, that's right. And the confidence is not confidence in your business, in your products, in your services. It's being confident in your customer's business. And a good way to think about this is unconsidered needs. So where this usually starts is when your customer has something specifically identified and specific. So think of this as kind of an RFP, like a request for proposal, request for quotation process. And in this red box, what your customer wants to do is drag you down to the lowest common denominator versus your competition in an RFP, RFQ shootout, and grind you down in price. And if kept in this box, the fact is the only value you really can add here is price, which of course is unacceptable. So what we really need to do is reveal unconsidered needs. We have to reveal unconsidered needs for your customer by introducing problems or challenges that once again can challenge their certainty. And the phrase I use time and again is, test yourself this way. Are you telling your customer something they didn't already know about an opportunity, problem, or risk they didn't know they had? And let me just give you just a quick example. I was recently working with one of the largest banks in the United States, and their customer was a major bricks and mortar retailer just getting into e-commerce as quickly as they can for obvious reasons. And the salesperson at the bank went on this retailer's website to make a purchase. And what they found was when they got to the buy box, they actually had to create an account in order to purchase something. So the bank salesperson went back to the retailer with a keen insight or a need, which was, did you know that almost a third of consumers drop out of the buy box on your website if there's no guest checkout available? And then brought a very compelling question, and that is, I wonder where your customers go when they have their credit card out and they want to buy from you. You know, I fear they might go to Amazon, where they're likely to have Amazon Prime already set up. So in this instance, the bank salesperson brought in an unconsidered need. So this retailer didn't know what they didn't know, got specific to Jim's point about the risk. They identified an $80 million upside opportunity by introducing full end-to-end e-commerce solution, and they helped mitigate a risk, because the greatest risk to this retailer was losing the lifetime customer value of those consumers and giving that metadata away to Amazon. So you want to think long and hard and use Tim's phrase, bring in some intellectual altitude to reveal unconsidered needs, and then match those to the unconsidered capabilities of your customer. And the unconsidered needs, they really need to be revealed. So they need to be revealed. And I'm reminded of Einstein's quote regarding Mozart, where he once said, the music of Mozart always existed in the universe. It was just waiting to be revealed. And that's the way unconsidered needs are. They exist in your business. You need to reveal them, map those over to your unconsidered capabilities, get out of the red box. And often this will shape how your customer might guide or write their RFP, RFQ. So Jim, being CIO at Procter Gamble for many years, I might ask Jim to come in and talk to an example here.
Yes, I love this, Jim, what you were talking about, unconsidered needs, and I couldn't agree more with you. I can think of a ton of examples, especially in the risk, whether it's operational risk, security risk, PII information, elevating that up. Now you're not having a commodity conversation just about cost. But I'm kind of going back through some of the real big deals that I've done over the years. And I'm also coming back to, I want to have confidence in the company I'm doing business with, and to the account executive specifically, and her or his team. Can they deliver against my business needs? So let's assume for a second, it's part of our evaluation criteria. We're making an evaluation based on the team behind the software or the services that are being sold. And I can't tell you how many deals were won just because the team that came in were dripping with confidence. They had done this before. They know the playbook. They got the plans, they got mitigation, they got the A players on all the big interventions, and they would share it, name, rank, serial number of all the people. You could tell they thought through it. And I'm really getting at speed to value. So if you're going to do a deal with someone, and let's say whether it's software or services, and it's a material multi-million-dollar deal, your client, in my case, I would have my finance managers do an NPV analysis and risk adjust your solution in. If we had confidence in your ability to deliver, you got higher scores and a lower risk factor compared to your competition. So I think it's really critical here, Jim, what you were sharing, and it does show up, and it shows up in the RFP and our evaluation of RFPs. The actual confidence of the staff, the team, and the product itself. Their knowledge of our business just gives us more confidence, and frankly, it will show up in terms of higher probability to win the deal.
Jim Fortner, when Jim Druckrey painted this picture of the red box, if you simply respond to what is exactly requested and exactly known by the company you're going to meet with, he indicated you sort of unwittingly put yourself in the commodity box. Yes. And that you have to do something different. So getting out into this green box, I'll call it the green box, does that, when they come in and give you something you said educate me and show me the disruption. Is that what you were talking about here, that you want to have this green box conversation because the red box ones sound the same?
Yes, but you got to quantify the green, and that's the challenge, but you have to do that.
Yep.
Good deals force quantification. So for instance, I can't tell you how many deals I've done in the green box, things like outages. So at P&G, and I would say CPG industry in general, which I do talk to quite a few CPG firms, you have to be always on. You can't be down. Your systems and your business processes just need to run. Now, if you're down for an hour, what does that mean to the company? And if you got a solution in the green that says, look, you're asking for 90, let's say 1 hour downtime a week, but I can give you 5 minutes of downtime during the week, and here's what we would estimate the value of that is. Now we're having a whole different conversation, and this truly could be a board of director call. I know I've been in a lot of board meetings where this idea of business risk keeps coming up, and it's only going to be more so in the future. So what you're doing is you're educating. You know, you're obvious, the decision still may be made in the red, but then if it's a tie, you're going to win that if you have a lot of green value. And if the decision goes up to a higher level, possibly to the CFO, then the conversation could just be about the green, assuming the red's somewhat close.
I love the way you said that. I mean, at some point, if you go in on the red because the RFP said you're going to, you should be here, you run the risk of both not differentiating yourself as well as commoditizing the price. So I would like to say that, like, creating pricing uncertainty and creating differentiation both live in the green if that's what you're trying to accomplish. And you said it so well that all things considered equal in the red, you look around and go, okay, now what? Coin flip. The green is got increases your odds of winning. Jim Druckrey, any final thoughts on that? Because a segue to quantification is next. Jim Fortner just brought that up, but I want to give you a last word on this one.
Yeah, just one observation, Tim. That red box is interesting, and I'll use CRM as an example. I was once in a room where Mark Benioff, of the co-founder of Salesforce, was asked, well, how did you become the fastest growing enterprise software company in history? They said, well, we decided that the CIO was really the CIO. So we went, in RFP, RFQ processes where we were usually trapped within like CIO decision makers. We went to CMOs, COOs, CEOs, CFOs. How good do you feel about the value and the return you get for your IT spend relative to the CRM data? So they got out of the red box by revealing unconsidered needs of simplicity, access, the depth of their metadata, revealed unconsidered needs, identified unconsidered capabilities, and then took dominant share in the category.
And I think that the point there was that these unconsidered needs can be from someone other than maybe the traditional decision maker, even an executive. And I mean, no offense, I'm sure, to Jim Fortner as a CIO, that you were was not aimed at him, but he was sensitive to the business deciders, right, Jim?
Oh yeah, I mean, and Jim's right. I was there. I remember Salesforce, as well as the BlackBerry days when the BlackBerries were dropped in to the sales teams within companies, and they just came in. Same with iPhones. And that's, you see that quite a bit. So I think progressive CIOs are out in front of that. You're never going to catch everything, and that's okay. You should not have a big fortress around digital coming into a company's got to come through the CIO. Those days are over. And I think any CIO that's operating that way should have an exit strategy, because I would not want them being my digital officer. You got to partner with the CMO of a company or the chief sales officer of a company, because their teams are out there on the fringe. They have line accountability. So these green things that Tim and Jim you're mentioning, to them it's mission critical. So the conversation must get elevated. Now, but this is, you got to be careful. If I am Salesforce, take Salesforce.com. If I'm Force or I come in to P&G and I want to sell the Force platform, and I go around the CIO, and in our case, we have a real strong network with the CMO. You got to be a little careful you don't disenfranchise the CIO network, because you need them to make this stuff work. You got to be very skillful in how you do that, and very positive, versus doing an end round and you disenfranchise the whole IT organization, and then now you want enterprise data, you're not going to get it. It's a little bit challenging.
So Jim, would it be fair to say then that you're not doing an end run, but because your statement earlier, as a seller, you've maybe encountered more companies than that CIO has, right? You're myopically, as a CIO, you're sort of myopically, parochially focused on your own company. As the seller, you've worked with many companies that look like this, and what you're doing is maybe you're bringing information from the line accountability people you've worked at other companies with and bringing insight into the CIO here, versus doing an end run. You're kind of bringing sort of, you're teaching this CIO what you've learned about line managers from other companies you've worked with.
Exactly. I would approach this like Tim. I would say, look, I am here to help you become successful in your CIO-ship. And I have put this technology into other companies, and they have grown their sales by X, or they've reduced their cost by Y because of this platform. And here's what works. If we can get your marketing officer with you, we can educate your marketing officer, and they can pony up some resources to help us drive this in with a very little overhead. And we can get speed to value at 2 times faster than the other solution sets. Is this something you're interested in? And I would just, I just think there's competition, and in each of the markets, each industry is a little different, but the competition out there is so great. These good CIOs are hungry for solutions. And if you come in with a partnership mindset that you understand this landscape, you've seen it work, and it works through partnerships with the business. Are you up for it? Because I could teach you how to do this. I think it's great news.
So Jim Druckrey, in your experience, I know some people, when they see this green box, they go, wait, the customer's supposed to tell me what their needs are. I'm supposed to, they'll get mad if I don't just respond to their stated identified needs. Is that true? As a C-level executive, do you want to make sure people just stay in the box and that's your goal, or is that part of the test? You want them to see how creative they are. Just tell me how you respond when people bring unconsidered needs, even though you didn't ask for them.
Yeah, I'd say it's part of the test, Tim. And the way sellers should think about it is, you need to get to the decision maker that will fully benefit from the totality of what you're proposing. And I'll just give you a quick example. I was just working with one of the largest petrochemical companies in the world, and their big customer was Archer Daniel Midland, the big agribusiness company. They were selling things like, fuels and lubricants, and you can imagine what that red box looks like, where it's just a tech, a spec, and a price. And they revealed that safety was their customer, meaning Archer Daniel Midland's highest priority. They had a lot of ideas and technology on how their products could help Archer Daniel Midland be more safe. So our products can help machines run longer, because people get hurt when machines go down unexpectedly for maintenance. You can't bring in predictive analytics, predictive maintenance without these additional safety features that are enabled by our IP and our technology. And what's interesting about this one, the petrochemical company was pitching, tied up with procurement. Procurement reported to the chief operating officer, that also happened to be the chief safety officer. So when they elevated that conversation to the COO level, who also had responsibility for safety, that COO went back to the procurement team, asked them to rewrite the RFP to expand that red box, to integrate the unconsidered needs they had not evaluated, which had been mapped over to unconsidered capabilities, Archer Daniel Midland didn't understand their big supplier had.
Awesome. I'm going to keep, that was, tremendous insight. And I think every person who's listening today would love to get each of you on the phone and find out more. I'm looking at the time and I want to get us to the third C, compelling, because both of you now have brought up this idea that being compelling kind of takes two flavors, three flavors. One, being compelling is being consistent and competent with the business issues of the day, the external factors, and their strategic initiatives. And also being able to introduce needs they didn't know, because the things they know haven't killed them yet. The things they worry about are the things they don't know. So there's an opportunity. Now, to be compelling, at the end of the day, it still has to be quantified, doesn't it, Jim? I mean, you mentioned that as part of like the last piece of buyer's perspective. This has all been great, but boom. And then Jim Fortner said, yeah, this is unconsidered needs are awesome, but can you quantify it? So at the end of the day, executives still have a rational, logical brain. They have emotional brains and intuitive brains, but they also, they do want something to validate that decision. So let's just talk about the third C, compelling, which Jim Druckrey, you say has to do with the quality of your economic justification.
Yeah, it does, Tim. And the other issue is, how do you reverse out from your competition? And I have to say, I've seen the PowerPoint decks for most of the Fortune 100 and probably a lot from the Fortune 500 and also deep in verticals. And the fact is, most PowerPoint decks look the same. Kind of, where is the power? What's the point? I know you didn't write what I'm seeing. So economic justification is not like the last page in a PowerPoint. It's not one-dimensional. It's three-dimensional. So we're just going to hit kind of the three corners of return on investment. The first is what we like to call hard R's. So this is specifically where your solutions can impact and improve their income statements, P&Ls, and balance sheet. So examples, how can you increase their sales, as Jim mentioned? How can you reduce their cost? In a post-cloud world, how can you improve my asset utilization? How can you help me enter new markets? Speed to money. So in pharmaceutical, how quickly can you help me clear FDA approval hurdles? Cross-selling, upselling, reducing churn. As CEO of Adobe likes to say, reducing churn is the new revenue. So we want to capture all of these hard returns and think about it as kind of getting a receipt. The second corner of ROI is around strategic returns or strategic R's. And of course, the R is the return, ROI. So think of strategic R's. What big bets or big risks do your customers face? And how can you help them accelerate their big bets and mitigate their big risks? So regulatory compliance, GDPR in Europe, security concerns everywhere. Let me just give you kind of a quick fun example of a big bet. Green Mountain Coffee, relatively mid-sized commodity coffee company based in Vermont in the US. A commodity company. They decided against the hardware business. They bought Keurig, the Nespresso-like coffee dispenser. And then they made another bigger bet. Their parent company bought Krispy Kreme donuts. So they have commodity coffee beans. Let's use proprietary hardware for coffee at home, and we'll sell more coffee if we own the donuts. Now, the reason I shared that anecdote, if you were, let's say, a cloud company, if you were IBM or AWS or Microsoft or Google, with all these acquisitions, the company would be wanting to get on common architecture, common metrics and measurements to get speed to money as quickly as possible, shorten cycle times to get speed to money. So think about how can you attach your solution to a big bet or big risk your client faces, reduce that risk because risk doesn't get delegated down, and accelerate my big bet. The third corner of ROI is one that is significantly growing in importance and dramatically undervalued by enterprise sellers. And that's what we call soft returns. So this is everything from customer satisfaction to employee satisfaction to net promoter score. McKesson is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Their CEO is rated by their board on physician satisfaction. Physician satisfaction. The head of Royal Dutch Shell is now rated by his board on reducing carbon footprint. So one of the larger energy companies in the world is being measured on producing less energy. The Business Roundtable, a well-known group of executives, C-level executives, recently published an interesting report that said environmental and social good is far more important to the long-term, to large enterprise than financials, because doing business responsibly, treating your employees right, doing social good will overwhelm financials in the long term. So these are kind of major changes in the C-suite. And what you want to do is help convert those soft returns to hard returns. So for example, if you can reduce employee turnover, you can increase the amount of time that's spent on value-added selling. You can reduce recruitment costs, convert those to hard R's. So in other words, if you kind of look at the seesaw, which we'll draw for you at the bottom of this graph, you want the return to outweigh the investment. So in other words, you need to get a receipt and add up the totality of all these returns, hard, strategic, and soft, and then access that executive that will fully benefit from the totality of what you're proposing. And this is a great approach for a more compelling message. Jim?
I love it, Jim. I was sitting there thinking, okay, I'm a software sales guy, or I am a system integrator or something, or services company. You guys got me all scared. You got a lot of great information here. How do I get started? And this is where I would go back to, if I could give you very specific account information, that way you, instead of guessing like what company A, B, or C has on the inside, what are their strategic priorities, what are their investments that they need to make, instead of guessing that, you got people that used to work there, they could tell you. So I would take advantage of that. I just think you got a very narrow window to, with your solution that you're trying to sell, you got to go in and be very targeted. Just food for thought. One of the things I had, and I really liked, I had a strategic portfolio, an innovation portfolio of so many millions of dollars. I won't say how much, but the company invests. And I think I've talked to a lot of companies, and I think more are starting to do this. So instead of just kind of willy-nilly going out and typically in the past, each functional officer would make a pitch to the CFO and to the CEO about getting money for projects. Well, that's not very strategic. The best way to do this is at a board level, you start making choices on where you need to invest and how much you need to invest. So like Jim, you mentioned environmental. Okay, the companies are going to spend so much on that based on the cash flow that they have coming in. So if the CIO is plugged into those decisions in that conversation, the CIO can help the company allocate funds to different buckets. Then you have a portfolio that you're managing of innovation across all the buckets. Some could be environmental, some could be other compliance related projects, some could be driving margin enhancement to free up more cash, and some could be top line. I know, for instance, at P&G, we were focused a lot on top line with some of our projects, but that changes. That could change from year to year depending on the needs of the business. So I think we need to kind of step back and say, okay, now how do you attack a company? Do they have an innovation portfolio? So how much are they going to spend in these various areas? What are those strategic areas within the innovation portfolio that they're looking to enhance? If I know that going in, instead of pitching my product for an area that's no longer a priority, I might bend it a little bit and say, you know, I wouldn't start there. I'd be very focused on where I want to start first. I would start in a very specific market with a low investment of capital, with a CXO sponsorship. So that way you can, if you run into issues, you got somebody you could directly talk to. And I'd have an innovation conversation. I would get the CXO to lean in on me and say, hey, I will sponsor this. I'm not going to ask for any money right now. We just want to learn together. But I guarantee you that we're going to drive value. And then as the value comes in, then we can talk about paying for it. But don't have the commercial conversation up front because you'll scare away the client.
So sometimes there's fancy words like I just put up on the board here: hurdle rates, payback periods, NPV, and the like. And to the average seller, are these important? Like when it comes to justification, are there specific things that you are watching and looking at? And like, so, Jim Druckrey, how important are these? And then I think Jim Fortner, like when Emissary says, okay, you want to hear about X account or Y account, is part of it helping to explain or express the justification tools that company uses. So Jim Druckrey, maybe walk through these real quickly, and then Jim Fortner, your thoughts.
Sure. So the metric and the ROI calculation that is important to you as a seller, there's only one, and that is what is specific for your customer. So you just need to do a little research, look at their annual report, read an earnings call transcript to understand how the C-suite is being measured. It might be return on sales, it could be return on capital. So understand what that metric is. You don't have to be a CFO. You want some simple definitions, go to Investopedia to research. Net present value, internal rate of return, payback period, those are all kind of usual suspect financial metrics. Hurdle rate, just by quick definition, is kind of an internal number that I typically don't share, but as Jim would know, that includes the cost of capital, other things your executive decision maker is comprehending. It's rare, really rare, that an enterprise seller would ever ask me what my hurdle rate is. I might not tell she or he, but I'd be impressed that they ask. So just understand what financial metric they're using, map your solution over to that, and include that in your vocabulary, because decision makers always have an aggressive relationship with numbers. Jim?
Yeah, I agree. And you typically will have purchasing and or finance running these RFPs. So this will get the numbers real quick. The finance guys and purchasing folks reported to me. I paid them to make sure that they can tell me with confidence which projects need more investment and which ones we need to stop. I would look at, we ran NPV analysis and we did speed to value. Speed to value was really important to me. I wanted those projects that I could turn over very fast and eke out value. So if I was putting an innovation into a distribution center or plant and I got 100 of them, if I can do all that in 2 years versus it would normally take 5 to 7 years, the value to the business is massive. So you got to make sure that, and this is the seller's got to be driving this. If I'm a seller, I would say, what can I do to drive speed to value? If we put this in the cloud, obviously a cloud architecture helps immensely. If I had core competency on business processes and I brought some experts in that could train your users how to take advantage of this, we could quadruple the speed at which we implement, and it drives the adoption. So these kinds of things I think are super critical. And they will do numbers. Hurdle rate is something that's Jim's right. It's internal. As a shareholder and an owner of a company, you absolutely want to drive high margins. I'm kind of looking at a rule of thumb. I want my projects to pay off within about 6 months. I want it within a fiscal year. It's got to pay for itself. If something's going to drag out longer, then that project is at risk of getting canceled at some point in time.
Awesome. Thanks, both of you. Hey, I'm looking at the time here, and I know that People always have things to do around the top of the hour. So what we're going to do is, I know we've been collecting Q&A, and my promise to you is that I'm going to gather the Jims together. We're going to write out answers, and we're going to send those out to everybody who's registered here so that you can see the answers to those questions. Because unfortunately, we had such good insight coming that I didn't want to disrupt it and rush us to the questions. But they will get answered, and you will all see them, and they will come out shortly. I want to make everyone aware of 2 freebies. There's a free report on gaining access to the C-suite from Corporate Visions, and there's the link, but you're going to get these slides and this recording so you can check out the links there. And I want to make note of Emissary's podcast. They bring in former Fortune 1000 execs in different industries to talk about key executive level trends and selling strategies, industry by industry. So I think you might want to sign up to get the portal access to the ones that have been done and be alerted to those as they come, because that is insight on the key industries that you're selling to. That's important. So I basically want to say thanks to Jim Druckrey and Jim Fortner. Jim Druckrey, thank you for those frameworks. Each of those under the 3 C's is a takeaway for our audience today to understand how they can better demonstrate the competence, confidence, and compelling nature of their story. So buyer perspective, unconsidered needs, and then the ROI business justification frameworks. Jim Fortner, representing Emissary, thank you for your insights on top of those frameworks. But what I'm intrigued about for our audience is what your company does. You have thousands of former executives from these various companies that when somebody needs insight on a named account, they can call Emissary and talk to somebody who used to work at that account and get some insights. So I think that's an awesome consideration for sales reps to get account-specific insights and build on these frameworks with intelligence related to the account you're actually targeting and going after. So awesome. Jim and Jim, thank you so much for your insights today. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. Remember the freebies that are available from both organizations, and be sure to circulate the link to any seller or supporter of sellers that you know needs to have better executive conversations. Thank you, everybody.